Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another exciting episode of the Vinny Eastwood Show, broadcasting from New Zealand, the fabulously fluoridated paradise capital and the jewel of the South Pacific, with absolutely no trace of radiation in the seawaters. We know because the government stopped testing for Fukushima radiation in the seawater about halfway through last year. My very special guest today is Chris Fowlie, the man, the running man, in the Schwarzenegger sense of the word, in the hemp store. What's up, Chris?
G'day, Vinny.
Can you please give people a bit of a background about the hemp store and where it started? And also, we've got to promo the upcoming J-Day a little bit here.
Fine, yeah, sure. So the hemp store is New Zealand's only specialist hemp store, and we started it up in 1996. This was myself and Nandor Tangsos, who later became a MP for the Green Party, and Mike Finlayson, who was my predecessor running Normal. So all of us have a long history involved with Normal, and we had actually just formed the Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party at the time, 1996. And we ran it in the first MMP election. We fundraised well over $250,000. We spent all of it in that election. We drained the tank. We were exhausted. We were broke. And the party only got 1.8%. It was really disappointing. And given that you've got, well, certainly around the time, 20% of the country being regular cannabis consumers, and we managed to talk less than 1 in 10 into voting for the party. But fundamentally, we were broke, and we decided, right, we need a business that allows us to remain as activists and to get this law changed and to provide, funds so that we could, not be behind a desk 9 to 5, but that we could have some flexibility. We could stay as campaigners. We could have a shop that is a focal point for that people can come in and talk to us and things. And so that's what we did. We also, at the time, of course, realised, well, after we'd put in so much time and effort and money into the ALCP, we kind of, individually, we all came to the same conclusion that we didn't want to do that again in another election. And other people have. Other people have continued the ALCP, and that's absolutely fine. But for us personally, we decided that we wanted to get involved in other political parties and try and influence them, rather than being competitors to those parties, be infiltrators to those parties. And the first one we picked was the Green Party. And we did. We signed up a lot of members, and we got involved in it, and Nandor became an MP. And that was really the last time that we were close to cannabis law reform, was around that 2001, 2 to 3 kind of period. The last 10 years, it's been sort of stuck in a rut. And now the synthetic cannabinoids have brought us, again, really close to it, where we have this national debate going on all over New Zealand with people saying, why have we legalised that synthetic stuff when we continue to have the world's highest arrest rate for the natural cannabis, which everyone knows is the safer choice and that people would much rather have, and that if natural cannabis was available, there would be no market, no demand for these synthetic substitutes. They're only used because natural cannabis is illegal. So to us, it seems a very straightforward proposition in that, and to most of the country it does too. To the government, of course, they have a bit of trouble getting their heads around it. But as I say, the hemp store we started to be a base for activism, and to let us remain activists rather than having to go out and find real jobs.
Now, did you not, man after my own heart, did you not get an award of some description for activism this year?
Yeah, the Star Trust, who had a conference called Pathway to Reform in April, and in their wisdom, they decided to name me Advocate of the Year, which was very much appreciated. It's certainly the first time I've ever got an award like that, and yeah, it does mean a lot to be recognised by your peers and to have that sort of pat on the shoulder and stuff. So yeah, I really appreciated that, but of course it's not why we do it. We do it because we want cannabis to be legal. But again, that position of wanting cannabis to be legal is not through self-interest. I mean, I am a cannabis consumer. I consume as much as I want to. The law has no influence on that. It doesn't tell me, it hasn't made me stop. It hasn't made me start. It's irrelevant to what the law says. But what it does do is it forces me into the shadows. And New Zealand's 500,000 regular cannabis consumers are all labelled as criminals. We all have to consume it in less safe ways. We don't really know what we're smoking. We're just hoping it hasn't been laced with pesticides and things, or poisoned deliberately by the police. We have to consort with criminals, and we have to get drug tested, and we lose our jobs, and it gets held against us if we have a dispute over children, like a custody battle. Then the cannabis consumer loses their kids simply because they're a criminal. There's all sorts of reasons why we want to change that, but none of those things affects me personally. I'm kind of, I guess if I think objectively, I'm fairly kind of middle class, kind of ordinary kind of guy. I just don't come to the police's attention. I could quite happily just go off and do my own thing. This is not through a feeling of self-interest where I want the right to get high or whatever. And this is what a lot of prohibitionists accuse law reformers. Oh, you're coming from self-interest. You're just a bunch of pot smokers. And they belittle us for that. They assume that everyone who wants law reform must be a drug user, and you're doing it through self-interest. Well, that just simply isn't the case. I mean, the fact that opinion polls here in New Zealand, depending on how you ask the question, put support for marijuana law reform anywhere between 50 and almost 90%. So a clear majority for changing the law. And yet when you look at who actually uses cannabis, you're looking at between 15 and 20%. So the vast majority of people who want the law to change do not use cannabis. And that, in fact, should be the assumption that any law reformer is not a cannabis user, because that is the typical law reformer does not use cannabis. But we're always labelled as self-interested hedonists who just want to, be selfish and do our own thing at the risk of everyone else and stuff. And that just couldn't be further from the truth, I think.
Yeah, well, there's a good reason why you're not getting busted. I remember having a conversation with a policeman while I was going to Auckland University a few years ago, Chris, not 100 metres from the hemp store in Alban Park.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I was doing an essay, right, about cannabis for uni, and I said to him, so what do you look for when you're looking for cannabis users? And he goes, groups of males under 25.
Yeah. That's pretty true. I mean, I think the last time that I would ever have had an interaction in terms of that kind of thing would have been, under 25. And as soon as you kind of get to that age, they stop looking at you. And that, of course, is part of the problem, is that the cannabis law enforcement is based on stereotypes and the prejudice of the person enforcing the law. So if that particular police officer thinks that pot smokers have dreadlocks and dress in kind of reggae colours, well, they'll just go after anyone who looks that way, whether or not they're a cannabis consumer. And so, and people notice very well if they happen to look that way. If you've chosen to have that kind of alternate kind of look about you, then you will be getting regularly hassled by the police. And everyone out there who has brown skin or dreadlocks or funny hair or piercings or is under 25 or whatever, if they kind of tick a box that some bigoted police officer thinks applies to a cannabis consumer, they're getting hassled and searched regularly. And as soon as you don't look that way, then it all kind of stops. Now, some people would say, well, you should just change the way you look then. You should just all go straight. But that misses the point. We don't live in a society where we're all told to look a certain way. And if that's the society we want, well, let's just bring back the Nazis.
That's right. In New Zealand, when the police say, papers please, it should be because they need to roll a joint.
Yes, for us, to help us out.
Yeah, I mean, you get pulled over because you're like asleep at the wheel or something like that, or whatever, you're traumatized or attacked, the cop comes up to you and goes, papers please, and you get, here's some zigzags thrown, he rolls you a joint, he goes, here, take on this, son, you alright? Yeah? Feeling better? Yeah. Right. Actually I am, officer, this is quite nice.
Well, yeah, we all know they have the best weed.
In an ideal world,
And I think every cannabis consumer that I've ever had the pleasure of talking to has a story about their weed being confiscated from them by a police officer who very much seemed like he was about to smoke it.
Yeah, I think one of my cousins was... one of my cousin's mates up north near Kaitaia, he pulled over by a cop on the side of the road speeding 110 k's, and they've been smoking weed in the car, so the cop sticks his snout in and he goes, I smell weed, what do you got, boys? Give it here. And the boys give them the ounce that they just bought, and the cop looks at the ounce and he puts it in his pocket and he takes his papers out and his tobacco, and he starts rolling a cigarette. And one of the boys in the car looked at his papers, and he realised that the cop had ripped off cardboard from the papers packet to roll roaches for joints, and they let them off with no speeding ticket or any charges. They took that ounce and smoked it, bro.
Yeah.
That's what happens in an illegal market, because who's going to say the police stole my weed?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So, so there's no real way to solve that other than by changing the law, really, and giving them something better to do. And increasingly, a lot of police do agree with that. Certainly around Auckland and other kind of metropolitan areas, they see the other things that are more important. And I certainly find in the Auckland CBD, you have much more tolerant kind of police that are a bit more worldly and kind of realize, can put things in context and not necessarily believe that guy smoking a joint is the top priority for their time, But I feel the most for the people in provincial towns around New Zealand and in the countryside and that, because they get hammered the most. And places like South Auckland also have really high arrest rates, because according to a bigoted cop, that whole South Auckland is just full of pot smokers. I mean, they've all got brown skin and look a bit funny, so they must all be smoking it. And whereas the good people of Epsom, of course, no, there'll be no cannabis use among there. They're all law-abiding.
Where do they find these bigoted cops? I mean, what's the recruitment process?
Yeah.
Are you a douchebag? Yes. Do you not respect people's rights? Yes. Do you like touching and pushing and hurting people for no good reason, and it makes you feel good about it? Yes. All right. You're in.
Yeah, I think it's just part of the culture in that there, and part of the sort of police college training is getting them thinking that way. And if they disagree, they just stay silent. The dominant culture of the police is to behave that way. So if you don't like it, it's not like you can go and work for another police force. There's only one. So they just stay quiet and kind of are forced to let their colleagues keep doing it. So
yeah.
So cannabis law reform is good for good police. If you're a good police, then you'll like it. You'll have better things to do with your time. You'll have the respect of your community. You have the cooperation of your community. And you'll have a sense that you're actually achieving something instead of just this futile, pointless prohibition that every police officer must know is a complete waste of their time.
How exactly is it possible for police to not realise that cannabis prohibition is a waste of their time? Do they get benefits themselves, personally, from doing this?
They're people. We often forget it, but they're people too. They don't always behave like it. But there's a big section of society that think the same way. So it's natural that there will be some police that feel that. But we haven't convinced everyone yet. There are still people out there that think that punitive sanctions have a good effect on people, and that firing people from their job or taking their kids away or cutting off their benefit or all these other harsh kind of punishments that are written into the law, they think that works. We, of course, that's our job to get across to them that it doesn't, and that you can do away with all those punitive sanctions. You can treat people with respect and compassion, and come from a position of wanting to help people rather than punish them. And those sorts of policies are actually more effective. And certainly if your focus is on reducing harm. If your focus is just, I don't want people to use cannabis, then you should want to legalize cannabis, because the countries that have legalized it have seen reductions in cannabis use. And that is held up also in the states in America that have allowed medical marijuana. They have seen, and there was a study that just came out last week about that. They have found that teenage use, which is the use that we always hold up as the most problematic and the thing we want to avoid, and even prohibitionists say, I don't care what adults do, it's the kids, I'm saving the children, and that. Well, teenage use goes down wherever marijuana laws change. It's happened all over America, it's happened in Europe. So, if you're not into people using cannabis, you should be supporting changing the law.
It's quite Machiavellian in a way.
Yeah, kind of, but if it's the outcome that counts, and this is where I think, often people that support prohibition are not outcome-focused, they are process-focused. They want the process to be that you are punished. The outcome should be what we are focused on, which is reducing harm. We all agree with that. We want to reduce harm. So pot smokers, they want to reduce harm to themselves. People who don't smoke, like to think, even if they think, these are hopeless addicts who aren't choosing for themselves. Well, if you're going to use it, you should do it in a safer way, and then meanwhile, if you absolutely hate the stuff, but you're worried about the effects on other people, well, that's also about reducing harm. So it always boils down to reducing harm. And if that is your focus, then you should be wanting to change the law, because the current system maximizes it in every way possible. You couldn't design a system any better if you wanted to maximize harm to drug users and those around them.
Do you believe that was a deliberate effort on the behalf of people who would want to do harm to society, subjugate people, profit off their pain and suffering, etc.?
Well, it's certainly not a stated objective of the law, but certainly when you look at the sort of debates around when drug laws first came in, then it wasn't so much harm reduction focused. It was very much on, you guys are scum and I want to punish you. New Zealand's first drug law was banning opium use by Chinese people. Only by Chinese people. Everyone else could use it fine. New Zealand's second drug law was banning alcohol by Māori people. And only Māori people. Everyone else was allowed to use it fine. The white publican could sell it to the Māori guy, no problem. That Māori person would be thrown in jail for even drinking some. And it was definitely used as a way to jail leaders of the Māori independence movement at the time.
I remember a big headline in the 1954 paper or something of like that, sly, grogging Māori court or something, like some dude calling himself the Māori Jesus, this huge propaganda hit piece. Well,
a prophet called Ruakanana was very influential around the sort of 20s and 30s, and there was
it wasn't the 50s, sorry, my mistake.
Pardon?
It wasn't the 50s then, sorry, my mistake.
Oh, it could have been reported then or something, but he was a bit earlier than that, and they were having all sorts of trouble with alcohol, but mostly with people being arrested for drinking it and stuff. And now, what did they do? They did something like they made some of their own alcohol so that they could bypass the publicans and provide it in safer ways and things. But anyway, they used that to throw him in jail, and where he stayed for quite a long time. They sent him out to the Chathams, I believe, which is what they did at the time. But yeah, anyway, certainly the origin of our drug laws has always been about punishment, not about helping people. But I think it would be pushing it a bit far to think that they deliberately wanted all this kind of crime and violence, and that they wanted gangs to be running tinny shops and things. But having said that, that's the outcome. And they've known about it for quite some time, and they've refused to do anything about it.
So, in that case, in lack of if all things considered equal, the simplest explanation is often the correct one. Psychopathic system, probably put together by psychopaths. Seems pretty straightforward to me,
Well, it certainly appears that way. Yeah.
It's quite comforting to me to know that I've figured all this out. Oh, I am dominated by ruthless criminal psychopaths at the top who pretend to be my saviour. That's nice.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Hey, it could be worse. It could be worse. We could already be totally subjugated, like in chains with a number burned into our forehead. We're not at that point yet. And I think that because the system's coming down on us in so many ways, I mean, cannabis is one of the really central ways that has got its hooks into society in so many different ways in terms of effect of not only the benefits that are proposed by the hemp products, 50,000 industrial products, all of the health applications of cannabis and whatnot in industry, biofuel, blah, 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 blah. All of those eclectic benefits, plus the damage to people at a psychological alone level of getting arrested. I mean, it did wonders for me, for my health. I now can get panic attacks. I didn't have those ever before I was arrested. And so the thing is, it's such a massive effect. This is why it should be a far more enormous issue in the public consciousness than it currently and always has been. And I think this is because the mainstream media and the mainstream politicians and what have you benefit from it not really being in the public consciousness in the reality sense of the word.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not a big one for kind of thinking, oh, it's the alcohol companies are doing all this secret lobbying behind, to keep them all in line and that. But I don't think they're the main reason for it, but I think there is a bit of that goes on. I'm certainly, we all know, for example, that Peter Dunn has been wined and dined by the liquor, gambling and tobacco industries. And that's on the record, that's a fact. But of course they're huge advertisers in newspapers and television and radio. So the journalists might like to think to themselves that doesn't influence their coverage, but there isn't. All our media is privately run, and they need advertising. Advertising is dropping because it's people are more and more online and stuff, and they're not so much reading things like the Herald anymore. But they get a lot of money from the liquor industry. And that may go some way to explaining why there's this kind of double standard, why they focus so much on these relatively small harms that happen from cannabis. I mean, you've got 500,000 regular users in New Zealand, and they just go on and on about, oh, you must all have damaged lungs and things. Like, it's just an assumption. Well, where are these cannabis smokers with the damaged lungs? Where are they? If what they're saying is true, there should be lines of them at every hospital in the country. The oncology wards should be full of people there as a result of their cannabis use. In fact, they're the opposite. They're usually full of people using cannabis as a medicine to help them with their treatment and their symptoms of their cancer. But anyway, if all these harms were true, we would be seeing them. But they keep just guessing and theorizing. Oh, for some reason we haven't discovered it yet, but of course it is happening. It's some sort of ticking bomb or something, But the lung thing is a ticking bomb. Well, we've got 50 years of really widespread use of cannabis in Western societies. Now, 50 years is well long enough for cancers to show up, right? I mean, you've got people that would have started in their 20s that are now in their 70s. If they're smoking their whole life, if cannabis was going to give them cancer, they would have it by now. They haven't. There is still yet to be, known a single death from cannabis toxicity or overdose or poisoning.
Apart from, as Jack Harris said, those people who got shot in the back running away from the cops.
Yeah, that's right. And there has been some misadventure. I mean, people that get wasted can do silly things, but that's not an overdose or a toxicology thing. That's just kind of being silly. And if you knew, hey, I'm going to get really shit-faced, that means I shouldn't hang out on the roof of my building. If you have that kind of attitude, well, you're not going to fall off the roof of your bloody building. But if you're an idiot who goes and takes drugs on the roof of their building, well, you might fall off.
It's natural selection,
Yeah, those sorts of deaths and that are generally idiots. So,
it's no great loss, I mean, it's not like, somebody who's going to cure cancer or something like that died or a longer lasting light bulb. Okay, it's just another idiot died. I mean, come on, bro. Mm. If anything, the drugs hasten the evolution of the human race in that way.
Quite possible, yeah.
An unexpected benefit.
Yeah, that's right.
Chris Fowlie from the Hemp Store is my very special guest, ladies and gentlemen, and he's a very busy man, so we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. This episode is sponsored by the High Tea Cafe in New Lynn. Go and check that out on the website, if you will, the VinnyEastwoodShow.com, and bear in mind, this is funded as per usual by your donations and regular subscriptions. Go into the VinnyEastwoodShow.com. That's Vinny with a Y, because it's the most important question. And Eastwood as in go ahead, make my news. And go ahead, make a donation. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinny Eastwood Show. We're broadcasting through the airwaves, and I hope that you're listening up, because there is always really important and very interesting things being said on the show, because there's important and interesting people. Here we have Chris Fowlie, who helps to run the Hemp Store, and also one of the, I would say he's one of the linchpins of cannabis legalisation in New Zealand history. Chris, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Vinny. Pleasure to be here.
Now, speaking of cannabis legalisation throughout history, something that is new. Synthetic cannabis is starting to become a big thing, and I do you appreciate the irony? of people who used to be out holding signs saying legalize weed because we need it are now out holding signs saying ban synthetic cannabis because weed isn't legal yet.
Yeah, I know. It is an interesting situation. But I tell you what, these things have actually been around for quite some time. And one of the lessons that I've learned with them is that a lot of these problems and that, they come down to the way things are sold. And this is the really important point with the synthetic cannabis and also, of course, natural cannabis, because a lot of the harms associated with natural cannabis also come down to the way it's sold. It's sold, through organized crime, and it's not tested for potency or for contaminants, and you don't really know what you're taking and what the cannabinoid mix is. It going to help my condition, or is it going to make me worse, or whatever? So it's the same with synthetics. Like, we started selling these in 1998. That is a long time ago, right? And there were no problems whatsoever until the media started hyping them up. And every time the media latch onto it, it ends up with a spike in use, all the wrong sorts of people doing it, the wrong sorts of people selling it, who hear about it. Oh, I can make a fortune selling this stuff, and all these other people get into it. But when we first started doing it, certainly for pretty much the first 10 years of selling it, no problem whatsoever. It was always very quiet, very discreet, just for people who wanted that. It was very much limited to medical users and people who were being drug tested. And of course, then when the media started promoting it, it became very mainstream. But the PSA, the Psychoactive Substances Act, which remains on the books and the government is not repealing, what they're doing is going to amend it to get rid of this interim period, which has let some products remain on sale. So, they went from an estimated 2 to 3 to maybe 400 different products out there available in different parts of New Zealand, down to about 40 odd. And they were the ones that there had been no complaints about and had no hospital admissions, and they had like a clean bill as far as they were aware. So they let those ones stay. Now, in response to all this kind of coverage that's been going on, they're taking it away. But they will be able to come back. But because there's nothing around, you're going to find the way that they're sold is going to change. So stores like the hemp store that want to remain within the system, and then thinking long term and thinking, right, we want to have a license, we're going to keep our nose clean, all that kind of stuff, probably won't be able to go to a shop like ours and get that kind of thing. But people that couldn't get a license in the first place, for example, and remember that they cut that from about 4,000 retail outlets down to 150. So there's a whole bunch of stores that they thought, you guys are not good enough and to sell this kind of stuff. Well, they've got nothing to lose. They can go back to selling it. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand about the way this act is written is it only covers things whose primary purpose is to induce a psychoactive effect. Now, if a substance or thing has another stated purpose, then it's not clear that it's covered. And in fact, it's not covered until the authority becomes aware of that substance, analyzes it, works out what it is, and declares it to be a psychoactive substance. That then would only ban that particular packaging of that substance. The packet can be changed, it can be called another thing, and it's legal again. So the cat and mouse situation can still happen and will happen, right? And it's all the dodgier side of the industry that didn't get licenses. They're probably the most likely, I suspect. It's not going to, like all prohibitions, this won't work. I mean, or certainly prohibitions of things that are widely demanded. And of course, the demand for these products is only because cannabis is illegal. So all of this would be solved if cannabis was made legal. And this brings me back to why, in fact, we started selling these products all those years ago, 16 years ago almost, was to draw attention to the futility of cannabis prohibition. For us, it was a little bit of a joke back then, and it is still drawing attention to the futility of cannabis prohibition. It's just taken a lot longer for us to end up having this debate. But this is one thing, a really good point, is that no matter what people think of synthetic cannabis, and a lot of people hate it, a lot of people don't mind it or don't know, a lot of people like it, right? But no matter what people think about it, it has brought us this debate about cannabis law reform.
Which I think is the reason why the media is hyping it up.
Probably ever.
I'd like to say, because I think this is part of the reason why the media is hyping it up and talking about the dangers and all of this stuff and making a big issue about it, because it's almost like by proxy they're trying to demonize cannabis by demonizing this artificial cannabis.
Possibly, yeah, but I think that's backfired because what I'm hearing in the media and on the street and that, even people that hate cannabis are saying they should just legalize the real thing. So they might have been trying to demonize cannabis by association, but they've actually ended up highlighting that cannabis is the safer choice. And people know it's the safer choice. Everyone does. It's safer than synthetic cannabis. It's safer than alcohol. It's safer than pharmaceuticals. And yet we're not allowed to have it. And what government policy does is force people to do more harmful things. And in the case of so it's encouraging alcohol over cannabis. It's encouraging synthetic pharmaceuticals and pills over natural medicines. And it's encouraging synthetic cannabis over natural cannabis, and now they're going to make it even worse by driving the synthetic cannabis trade, which will remain because there is not enough weed to go around. There are people being drug tested. There are people that can't break the law, all that kind of thing, or don't want to go to tinny houses, don't know where to get it. There will definitely be an underground market in synthetic cannabis, but it's just going to be more risky for the people involved.
Can I say? I want to ask you, Chris, in your professional opinion, does drug testing employees and testing them for cannabis and screening those people actually reduce workplace accidents or have any tangible benefit?
Not really. I mean, it has the only benefit seems to be for the employer who thinks that they've satisfied health and safety law by doing it. That seems to be the only thing, and the testing company that goes around and does it. But there's actually no... it's not compulsory for workplaces to do. They just have to have safe workplaces. They can do that in any way they want. They don't have to have drug testing, but these companies convince them that they do. But certainly the research that's out there shows no association between drug testing and safety and accident rates and things like that.
What about increased productivity or increased happiness for workers? Anything beneficial?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, no, you end up with decreased productivity in companies that do drug testing and this is a before and after study that found that the productivity drops because the workers don't feel trusted, they don't feel liked, it creates divisions, the management is seen as hypocritical because they're very seldom drug tested while everyone else is. So for a number of reasons, productivity seems to drop in places that do it. And certainly when you look at New Zealand, and we've just had a lot in the media about safety on the job in terms of people dying, and you look at the forestry industry, which was one of the first to get into drug testing in a big way, and has always been one of those industries that's, it's been very widespread through it. And yet of those 19 deaths that we've had in the last 3 years, which is a shocking record of, workers killed on the job in this one industry, none of those were related to cannabis. So, it's not that it's made, immediately made that industry safer or anything like that. And in fact, possibly it's to the detriment because the employer may get complacent because they're putting all the blame on the worker. They're saying, you are the one making this place unsafe, and I'm going to test all of you by taking your bodily samples and analyzing them and seeing what you get up to in your private time and that. And meanwhile, maybe they don't do what they really should be doing to make that job safer.
So basically, a whole bunch of marketing, salesmen, pieces of trash saw an opportunity to convince a bunch of short-sighted, unequipped, low mental faculty employers to treat their employees like crap.
I'll tell you what really reveals their motivation is the fact that they test for the inactive metabolite of THC. THC, COOH, is what is excreted by your liver and ends up in your put in your fatty cells all around your body, and then slowly over time, right? Now, if they wanted to, they could test for THC, and you would only find THC itself while you're high. And that could be correlated to impairment. But because they are able to, now cannabis is the only commonly used drug that is stored in fat cells and then excreted slowly through the urine. All other drugs, they don't have that option. So they only look for the drug itself. Like with methamphetamine, cocaine, all that sort of thing, they're looking for the drug itself. They're not looking for any kind of metabolite that remains because there isn't one. I mean, it's pissed out immediately. It doesn't hang around the body. But with cannabis, because it hangs around, they've chosen to look for that one. but they could have just looked for THC and put it on a par with all the rest. So that shows you their motivation. They're not actually looking for impairment. They could if they wanted to, but they're not actually looking for it. They're just trying to identify people who smoke pot so they can fire them.
Why? What's so wrong with stoners? I mean, are we bad people? Are we... Ah! I know what it is. We question authority.
That could well be it. That could be well be it. But you also have to look at the kinds of people who started the first drug testing companies back in the 80s and 90s, you know. It all sort of goes way back. But anyway, that's also why we're happy to sell that kind of detox product on synthetic urine and stuff at the hemp store. I mean, it's not because we're sort of saying to people, oh, now you can be high on the job or anything like that. And no one in my history of selling things like synthetic urine and detox products, no one ever has given me any indication or said, you know, that they're going to be able to smoke on the job now. This is not what people do. It's for their own private time. It's to protect their privacy. And we're more than happy to do it because these tests are a total sham. They don't measure impairment. They're incapable of measuring impairment because they're not even looking for THC. It's really easy to do that. And in fact, saliva testing, for example, even though that's also said to be a bit inaccurate, at least to its credit, it only looks for THC. So you only trigger a saliva test if you are actually high. If you're straight, you won't fail a saliva test. It's not possible. So, you know, they could easily do that. That's less invasive than getting people to piss in jars and things like that while someone watches over your shoulder. Yeah. You can also have computer simulation games. They're very similar to a portable PlayStation sort of thing. And you get people to do it at random times. It gets their baseline, like as a player. It's a sort of version of Tetris, I believe, and it checks your concentration and reaction times and things. And then you can just get people to do it at a random time, and if they're way off, you can be, what's up with you? And it might not be that they're high, they might be tired, they might be fatigued, they might have a diabetic attack, they might have had low blood sugar, who knows, right? So the advantage with that kind of thing is it doesn't discriminate based on the cause of impairment, it just picks up impairment.
Yeah, I mean, just having weed in your pocket and being worried about being caught with it can cause impairment.
Well, that's true too. And you know, it's just one of the many reasons why we got to change this law, and you know why we set up the hemp store to enable us to do that. And one of the things that we do is we pay for J Day to happen here in Auckland in Albert Park. Unfortunately, the council seems to think that we're some you know, big corporate or something, or you know that Normal is, and rather than a community event that it is, and so we get all these. Quite a lot of restrictions and things that we have to pay for, like, you know, things like hiring portaloos because they close the toilet block and make us hire portaloos instead. And they send their cleaners away and make us hire our own cleaners. We're not allowed to do that ourselves. We have to hire a professional company. We have to have public liability insurance even though we're using their facilities. You know, there's all sorts of things that we have to do, and it ends up costing, you know, several $1,000s, which Normal just doesn't have. So that's one of the good things about, you know, having the hemp store there is we can pick up that bill and make sure that J Day happens, which we're more than happy to do.
Well, you know, I think it has come down to the point in society where you realise that the government isn't actually behind doing a whole lot of public good in a lot of ways, and it becomes inherent, to me at least, that whoever's in the situation, whoever has the motivation, whoever has the resources, it's the responsibility of theirs. And then what's really strange is that when they fulfill that responsibility, I often see that they get inadequate what would you call appreciation for that sacrifice in a lot of ways. And I think you're very underappreciated in the cannabis movement in this country, Chris, to be honest.
Oh, well, you know, I'm not sure about that, but thank you. But we all do our bit, and you're doing a really valuable job here, and certainly a lot of people appreciate it too. And this is what we've got to do: is all pull together, and we can't do it alone. But now is the hour. You know what I mean? I mean, this is the as far as I can tell, when I look back through the years of cannabis law reform, it kind of goes in these 10-year cycles. Early 80s, there was a big, you know, early 70s, big push. Early 80s, early 90s was huge. Bus tour going around with Nandor and the Normal News magazines and that. early 2000s, we had Nandor in Parliament, cannabis inquiry. Then it just kind of fades away, you know what I mean? But it's happening in tandem with reforms in Europe and stuff. We seem to always be in the same cycle as them. But things are all sort of merging together now. We've got all the stuff going on in America, South America, the UN, here with the psychoactives. We've got the National Drug Policy under review at the moment. The Misuse of Drugs Act is going to be rewritten over the next year. That process starts later on this year, and they're going to actually, this is the current government, and Labour are into it too. They're saying they just want to write a whole new law, right? And this is a big chance, to really do it. And I really feel if we don't get things really pumping, and they are, we've got a lot of debate going in the media and people talking about it all the time, and that, not just cannabis law reformers talking about it, general members of the public all talking about it now. This is our moment. We've really got to make sure that we do it.
We need a better use of drugs act rather than a misuse of drugs act, because I think that's...
Oh, absolutely.
Have you noticed the irony between...
Yeah, I think we need something that if you are going to...
I was going to say, Chris, you was... it's the irony. They write a law called the Misuse of Drugs Act to prevent people from misusing the drug, and it's actually what it causes rather than prevents. It's like the Serious Fraud Office, just suddenly coming out and just starting to run serious frauds in this country.
Yeah, that's right. It certainly doesn't prevent use, and it certainly encourages more harmful use. So, it's a total failure, and this is the where we've kind of stalled. Everyone knows that. Everyone agrees with it. Like us, them, everyone agrees it doesn't work. The only question is, what do we do next? The PSA is a really good model for how you can approach regulating synthetic substances. It's not appropriate, really, for cannabis to go in there because it only allows products, not plants. But that doesn't mean it can't be changed. And these sort of two acts could somehow be merged anyway, it's a very interesting time. And it's going to be the first time... Well, the Misuse of Drugs Act is going to be 40 years old next year. It's ridiculous. It hasn't been changed in that time. So finally, I think it's become an embarrassment to all the politicians, and they've kind of made a little private commitment. We're going to get this thing changed in the next year. But it's what it becomes, Will it just be changing the name and it's basically the same thing with all emphasis on punishment and all that? Or will it be something much more progressive and learning from these lessons and following what best practice is around the world? And best practice is regulating controlled availability of substances with a focus on harm reduction and not all this emphasis on arresting people and throwing them in jail. Wow. So, these are the sorts of things that people need to come along to J-Day on the weekend, just to get in another plug for that. That's this Saturday, and it's all around New Zealand, all around the world, in fact. It's about 200 cities around the world. It's kind of been eclipsed by 420 Day in North America to an extent. Those 420 Day things are pretty huge. They were saying they might have got 500,000 people in Denver, or something ridiculous. But anyway, it's all over the world, all over New Zealand. It's Auckland, Albert Park. Hamilton is at the Lake Stage, which is in the Domain there, and Whakatane. I haven't even got the flyer on me, to be honest, but Whakatane's in one of the main parks in town. I'm sure the locals will know. Taupo's at the Domain as well, just on the lakefront. New Plymouth's at the Bowl of Brooklands. Lovely spot. I think that will be probably the most scenic one of the country. And you might actually, Wellington,
and if you go there, you will be able to have a lovely spot in a lovely spot.
Well, that's right. Wellington's Frank Kitts, again on the waterfront. We seem to have a bit of a theme there. Christchurch is Bridge of Remembrance in town there. There's a little part around there that's... Don't forget, that's right. And I think that will be an appropriate one for, remembering the victims of the war on drugs, the people that are in jail right now. The people that have been to jail, the people who have had their home invaded by thugs in the name of the law, or thugs stealing their weed.
In fact,
people who haven't been able to get their medicine. There's just people whose children have been kicked out of school, people who have been kicked out of school. I mean, there's all these victims of this current law that J-Day is a good day to just remember that and take stock and realise why we're doing this and why this law needs to change.
You know what?
And finally, of course, before I move on, Dunedin at the Octagon, that's going to be good as well.
Well, you know what? I don't think the victims of the cannabis laws and the trauma that they've all suffered, myself included, will ever be compensated. I think they'd have to just be satisfied with the compensation that this kind of crap won't happen to other people again.
Yeah, it's possible, but anything's possible. I mean, I wouldn't hold out hope for compensation, of course, but I would say that people who have had their homes taken off them could possibly be in line for restitution there. There's quite a bit of that, especially where there hasn't been actually any real sign of offending on the property. They just kind of take it by association, what they call tainted property. But in Colorado, there's has actually been some talk, there's some movement going on right now to repeal convictions. So anyone who's got a cannabis conviction in Colorado, they're saying you'll be able to apply and just write in or whatever, tell us you've got this conviction, and they take it off your record or whatever. So there's that on the one hand, and there is some talk there that if the tax revenue continues to go up, that a proportion of it could be put aside. They have something like the first 15 or 30 million or something of the tax revenue raised is dedicated to building new schools in Colorado, and then the next lot pays for something else, and it's kind of the way they've done it. So you'd need to sort of get in that line or amend that that initiative, but amending that initiative can only be done by passing another initiative. The legislature can't do it, because then you've got the meddling politicians tinkering with what people want. So that protection's built in. So, but anyway, there is talk that they could raise money for that in taxing the cannabis sales in Colorado.
Well, especially in the United States, I mean, imagine people suing the state for, what do they go through, suffering or something like that. They sue people for mental anguish, etc. I mean, imagine the mental anguish of somebody, say, like Tommy Chong, for instance, who had to spend a shockingly large amount of time, considering the BS reason why they locked him up in the first place. Imagine him suing the state for compensation after cannabis gets legalized there. This could open up a big can of worms. Yeah, that's exactly right. But that's one of the things that a good thing about regulation of that is it keeps people honest on all sides. So governments can't get away with that kind of stuff with a legal product. It's like you can't get away with drug testing when you have legal cannabis. So we're not to what they're doing now. They're going to have to use new technology in Colorado, because you can't be piss testing someone for what they did a month ago when it's legal. You know what I mean? So legalization actually forces them to be a lot fairer and to pay attention to things like the Bill of Rights and things like that, and to treat their workers with dignity and respect rather than just being able to get away with all this crap. Or like a gang who sells you half an ounce, charges you for an entire ounce, and if you come back and complain about faulty produce, they get you over the back of the head with a 2x4. Not a good way.
Yeah, but you have consumer guarantees and things like Colorado and that, so exactly, that kind of thing doesn't happen. And to an extent, we certainly were on our way to getting that with the Psychoactive Substances Act here, for people that want to take that kind of thing. They knew finally what was in them. They had warnings on the packets and that. They had the manufacturer's details and things. And as the research back to the market, then certainly when they get their full approval next year or the year after or something like that, then they're only going to get that approval if they're low risk. So consumers are going to be a bit more reassured about taking them. But as I say, you have a lot more protections built in a regulated environment like that, and you can make changes as you need to, as you become aware of things, which is what we've just seen. The government said, we don't have any more tolerance for these products, so we take them away. So you can do that with a regulated environment, but fortunately... In
the meantime, I'm going to pitch my hope to the Mongrel Mob Guarantees Act.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez. But, fundamentally, of course, we just keep coming back to the same thing that we've been saying the whole time, that these products have been available, which is since 1998. The only reason they're around is because cannabis is illegal. And they just go to show that you can't stop it. You can push it underground, but you can't stop it, and it just gets replaced by something else. But
that's why they call it weed. You can't stop weeds, man.
Exactly, yeah.
Doesn't matter what poison you use.
And, it's a good analogy for... They can't stop.
Oh, sorry, you cut out there a bit. A good analogy for what, Chris?
Oh, I was going to say, the weed's a good analogy for cannabis law reformers in general, They would just take over and pop up in unlikely places and then spread and multiply, and you can't stop.
Well, it does bring people together. Chris Fowlie from the Hemp Store, thank you very much for your time today, sir. And also, do you have a place where people can sample your wares and whatnot?
Indeed. And thank you very much for having me. And hope to see everyone at J-Day on weekend, on this Saturday, 3rd of May.
And what's the website for your hemp store there?
Oh, that's hempstore.co.nz. And normal, of course, is norml.org.nz, org.nz. And we have a new website that will be going live on Saturday. So come along to J-Day and we'll tell you all about it. I'm not going to tell you the URL yet because it's not ready and we don't really want people clicking on it. But it will be ready by the weekend, and it's this really cool new tool that lets people flick off an email to as many MPs as they want with a few clicks of a button, but they get to personalize it and rearrange it and everything, and it makes it all a personalized email, but it is just so super easy for people to do, and you're just going to be able to send 100 emails at the touch of a button. It's awesome. So tell you all about that at J-Day.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Now, ladies and gentlemen, bear in mind this is a listener-supported broadcast, so please go to thevinnyeastwoodshow.com and sign up for a subscription. You can do automatic payments through the bank account there or through PayPal. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again sometime.